me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Hi, everybody. 5 o'clock on a Friday, and we know what that means. Time for another episode of Cello Chat. With me today is Sarah Rommel. Sarah, I've got a bunch of questions for you. I'm very much looking forward to talking with you today, but I hope you're doing well.
Yes, I'm doing well. I'm here in Seattle, Washington, home after a quick trip to Europe. Yeah.
Terrific, terrific. Yes, your busy schedule that listed on your website with all the travels is definitely one of the things I want to ask you about. But let's start. I always love hearing how people got started on the cello. I know you also did not start when you were just, 2
Yeah.
weeks old or something like some people, and have made a wonderful career of cello playing, which I think is I think that's very inspiring. But you got started on piano. Anyway, if you'd tell your musical background, and then I also want to follow that up by asking, you've had a variety of kind of a who's who of some famous teachers, and how you'd compare and contrast their style. So,
Yeah,
how would you
yeah,
get
of course.
started?
As you mentioned, I first started playing piano when I was about 9 years old. Uh, I'm from like a suburb of Philadelphia, New Jersey, and eventually wound up taking private lessons for piano, and I liked it. It wasn't like super serious, but I was studying like serious repertoire, and I joined my middle school orchestra as a pianist, kind of on a whim, actually. And there were too many piano players in the orchestra, and so the orchestra teacher encouraged us pianists to learn an instrument in what she was lacking, and that was cello or bass. So, of course, I wanted to play the bass because cool kids play the bass. But am I not cool? I was also really short and really tiny and too weak to hold up the instrument. So I basically just started to learn the cello, and I would eat my lunch rather quickly in middle school, and then immediately go to the orchestra practice room, and I kind of taught myself how to where the notes were, and that was it.
Wow. And then how did that lead you through your education?
Um, I guess I was learning pretty rapidly. That was so I started cello when I was 12. And um, it was probably when I was about 13 that I decided that I wanted to be a cellist, a professional cellist. Um, there was just something about it that really resonated with me. Um, I don't know how else to say it. Oops, I'm giving the thumbs up, but there you go. Um, yeah, technology these days. And yeah, there was something that really like spoke to me, and I found like I could really articulate how I was feeling through the cello, and it just kind of opened up a whole world of expression that I didn't have access to. Um, And when I was 13, my mom took myself and a couple of other like musically inclined friends to Philadelphia, Center City, Philadelphia, and she had emailed the dean of the Curtis Institute of Music randomly asking for a tour for us because she had heard about this place. And he actually took time out of his schedule and gave us a complete like basement to attic tour of the Curtis Institute of Music, and we walked through classrooms with students in them, and I was like just smitten with the building because I don't know if you've ever been. It's just like this, like it's just dripping with wood, and it's like this really historic old mansion. And I couldn't believe that like you could go to a school and study just music and be like completely immersed in that world. And I was like, I want to go there without realizing the monumental task that was ahead of me to even make that happen. Yeah. So I like to say that I like practiced for 6 years to get into that school. from when I was 12 to 18.
Yeah. All right. And you studied primarily with Peter Wiley,
Hmm.
but
Yes.
then also Paul Katz and Hans. How did that come to pass that you studied with a variety of other teachers as well?
Through summer festivals and then like Ravinia or even like Meadowmount, and eventually like Gary Hoffman would come to Curtis a lot and like do like a little residency every year that I was there. And so I spent a lot of time working with him during my years at Curtis. And then when I went to LA to study with Ralph Kirschbaum, Ralph took a sabbatical for one semester. And so we had David Garingas come and we had Lawrence Lesser also come and teach us.
Excellent. Okay, so now backtracking a little bit,
Mhm.
um, as far as you're not the first person I've interviewed who had a relatively late start as cello
Oh,
at cello, excuse me, and
yeah.
yet became a brilliant cellist. I want to talk a little bit later about. I really like your playing style. I want to ask you about that. You know, the recipe for how to project but still have all the shapes, the melodic and musical shapes that we want.
Thanks.
But you know, okay, now I just completed another semester of teaching
Yeah.
arranging and orchestration. And in that class, one of the things I'm very careful about is kind of like all instruments are equally valuable, you know, sort of thing. From a standpoint of just their color and just their wonderfulness to have as options when we're composing, arranging, those sorts of things. But from a standpoint of getting started, there's something about your piano chops, you know,
Hmm.
that serve you well when translate to other instruments very well. I'm trying to see if you would be willing to recommend increased time and effort into piano as a way to just get your brain thinking musically infused with the theory of it.
Right. And I think yes, it is extremely valuable. And I think for me, when I was studying piano seriously, like seriously, I was kind of always it became quickly became my second instrument once I started the cello. But I mean, I was studying, like serious repertoire and stuff. But I had a really wonderful teacher named Rafi Basalian who was at the university near my house, and um he was very influential on my artistic self when I was a while I was a teenager studying with him. And so for me, I had, my cello teacher, but I also had my piano teacher who was also like infusing part of my cello studies through his ear and his artistry and musicianship. And so there was like a lot of input happening that really kind of cultivated my sense of artistic self, I guess you could say. Um,
Nice. Nice. Okay, so then how over the course of these various teachers, how would I mean, I think they tend to live on in our
yeah.
head, when we're playing, when we're teaching. How would
Mhm.
you kind of attribute to various ones that what you got from this person or that person, that made you the cellist you are?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I know it's not an easy one.
No, it's really not. Um, Gosh, with Peter Wiley, like I just was so enraptured with his sound and the breadth of and the resonance, like the depth of his sound. So in every lesson, it was just like a gift to hear how he was manipulating the sound in
Hmm.
like really subtle and nuanced ways. Um, and I think that was the takeaway that I got from Peter. And then when I went to go study with Ralph, like when I think back on my studies with him, which I still think about a lot. I mean, he was just like so transformative for me. as a musician and cellist, like my studies with him. Um, when I think about my studies with him, I think like, wow, he like really opened up my ears in a way that I was completely like naive. I had no idea how to listen. I feel like before then, and he has like the most incredible ears. So I just I think listening to how my sound, how I can really open up that sound without sacrificing the subtlety or nuance. Yeah.
Right. Right. It's very clear from your recordings, which is a wonderful thing to be able to have that cake and eat it too.
Mm.
So, okay, did from one of them, did you pick up your practice, your approach to practicing, or was that a lot from yourself? You have to have had a extremely effective recipe when you had your cello in hand in a practice room to have the trajectory that you did. You know, I mean, because people will say, "Oh, do what you love." And if you know, kind of like, want it enough. But it's a lot of
Yeah.
hard work in a practice
Crit.
room
Yeah.
doing the right things. So what's your recipe there?
I don't know if I'm the right person to be asking this to, because I think I, for a long time, had the approach of quantity over quality.
Huh?
Um, and I don't necessarily think now, in my, wisdom, I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. Um, and it was actually Ralph who said to me, like, he knew how much I practiced. Like, I made it like a thing that I would be the first cellist that would walk through those practice room doors every morning, um, just as like an accomplishment of the day, and perhaps a little bit of a competitive streak, you
Just a
know,
little.
just a little bit, And so he knew how much I practiced, and he didn't confront me about it, but he did like bring it up at one point. He's like, I know how much you practice and how hard you work in the practice room. But I wonder if it's a reflection of something else, that it's these are my own words, like more of an insecurity than anything else, really. So there's a way to practice smartly where you don't have to kind of like, just put the gas pedal down constantly. I think when I was, a teenager, because it was like a pretty rapid, like, trajectory. I did put a lot of hours in, and I think at that point it was helpful because I felt like I had a lot of catching up to do. Um, and I was going through repertoire very, very fast.
Mhm.
Uh, it took a lot though because I was trying to move so fast to kind of slow down and make sure that I was learning things correctly. So, um, I don't really think I had a method per se. And I'm not sure that answers your question
No,
exactly.
no, it's interesting though, because everybody's answer to that sort of question is either a little or a lot different, actually, as far as
Really?
what they focus on. Yes. And
Yeah.
so actually that makes me want to segue to the question I kind of touched on earlier.
Mm.
Um, what do you see as being kind of like the key or keys to your approach whereby any of your recordings you have not had to compromise musical shape for making sure that you project. And maybe
Mm.
I can combine that with the question of some people, when they do spend a lot of time in the practice room, when they're the first one there every day, they're kind of like make things happen no matter what, and they end up
Yeah.
with the danger of injury.
Hmm. Um, which I have not been immune to. I definitely have suffered from injuries, and not in many years.
Right.
But I think, and think I definitely like learned this with Ralph that you can never compromise the sound for volume, ever. Once you start to compromise the quality of the sound, then you're also you're compromising the kind of impact that that sound has. And for me, and something that I also talk a lot with my students, I started to kind of realize that almost harnessing the natural resonance of the instrument through releasing the sound was a way to actually like let the cello do its intended purpose and job. Like it is meant to do those things. We're kind of just manipulating it, but we don't need to choke the sound out of the instrument.
That's very nice. I'm releasing the sound. It was one of the things that I was going to mention if you didn't, is that it's
Mm,
it's clear that you have, like in my studio, we talk about follow through a lot, like you follow
right.
through in sports when you're holding on to something, but releasing the sound is the same critically important idea that even when you start a motion, you have in your mind the release rather than, oh yeah, I
Yes.
need to release it.
Yeah. I mean, like, exactly. If you're trying to sustain too much, which I think is, I teach a lot of like college age students. They come in and they're trying to sustain for hold on for dear life to the sound. And yeah, like you said, it could bring on a lot of potential injuries if not done um properly. But they're constantly trying to release that sound, and it is really like just choking it instead of just sending it out and letting the natural resonance take over.
Nice, nice. So, um, I know this is also not an easy thing to encapsulate, to put in a nutshell, but how would you describe your approach to teaching your students?
Oh boy. Okay, that's hard. I think no matter what, creativity and musicianship are always the primary focus. Um, and I think also stimulating curiosity and making sure that my students feel safe enough and
Hmm.
confident enough to explore and try different things and be bold enough to take risks. That those are the kinds of things I try to push for in the lessons. I don't consider myself much of a like technical cellist, I guess you could say. Like I wouldn't say that like I'm gonna pick up the cello and immediately gravitate towards like any kind of popper. Um, like give me Schubert any day over popper. But I I I always want that to serve whatever the artistic creative goal is. And so that's where I kind of tend to send my students down that path.
I like that very much and your choice of words and, you know, um, in fairly quick succession, talking about safe and then being able to feel bold. Because even students who don't self-identify as I know I have performance anxiety issues, will still demonstrate certain things on stage where it's like, ooh, it really took a hit compared to how they were just playing it for me
Right,
in a lesson or in a practice room or something. Um,
right.
but yeah, that ability to feel that safe and uh, the I don't know, just kind of that yes and that if
Right.
they
Yeah, that's great.
kind of
Yeah.
start to go with something that they don't go, oh no, that's not my style. They're like, well, maybe let's see where that takes me. And that's part of the
Right.
boldness too of, well, try it a new way, an entirely new way, even in the moment.
I like to think of lessons, rehearsals, practice sessions as like a laboratory where it's like a really fast-paced scientific method, where you identify a problem, run a hypothesis, you do your ex or you have a hypothesis, you run your experiments, it works, it doesn't, you try it, rinse and repeat. And you wind up like exhausting, hopefully, the possibilities so that you can rate like make a really confident and compelling and convincing decision. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, now that makes a good segue, I think, to um, I don't know, in your biography online, it mentions you as an enthusiastic chamber music player. And I think often the best chamber music performances are the ones where you can tell that there's, things, they don't sound premeditated. It
Right.
it feels like no matter what the other people are going to do, all the others are going to be just of one mind, even though they're forging new territory, kind of a thing.
Right, right. And I think there's something to be said where where in a chamber music setting, a musician takes a risk where they feel safe, again, like safe enough or that where they can trust their collaborators that, even if it doesn't 100% go okay, but that there's a way to rebound and that there's like a spontaneous conversation that happens. I think, you know, I'm I don't want to like cause any uproar, but like I think, rehearsals can sometimes get in the way of the creative process. Of course, we have to rehearse. Like rehearsal is important.
Right.
But like sometimes it can like run to the point where it's a little bit of overkill and where like it's too, like you said, too like over-examined or sanitary. And instead of feeling like alive and spontaneous.
Like that. I like that too. So let's see. Thinking from the perspective of like my studio, students in my studio watching these interviews, one of the things that I like to point out and to ask about is just kind of like how did a career evolve? I mean, on one hand, cello professor, so that's a kind of a like a secure job, but also you're traveling to all manner of whether it's summer festivals or
Mhm.
other countries, the opposite coast for performances. And sometimes this is a matter of opportunity knocking and you find a way to keep saying yes to it. But you've also founded chamber music groups. So you have a proactive initiative. The like that I know several of my students are going to end up having too, but just kind of like it can seem mysterious a little bit how
Mhm.
these things come about when they're not there yet. So how did those sorts of things, how did that path evolve for you?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. I think, well, a few things come to mind. The definition of success, I think, certainly has evolved over the past like 50 years. And that could look, I mean, it doesn't look like it did years ago. I mean, I think today you have to be multifaceted, you have to have lots of different dimensions. Um, And I think there's no one clear path to success. And ultimately, success is just happiness and fulfillment. So, whatever, like, that is the drive, whatever gets you to that is success, and that's successful. I think, my
Yeah.
opinion, just my opinion. Um, what were my two other points that I wanted to make? I think, like, all of these little bits and bobs of at least my career have kind of happened naturally or organically, like they were of the moment type of things, and some have been sustained longer than others, and probably for like a good reason. Like it's a mutually like not beneficial but blossoming type of artistic alliance, right? Um, And the other point I wanted to make was that I feel like an artist's life or a musician's life has to be ever evolving. and that in order to be like artistically stimulated, we're always seeking and searching. So I don't think there's ever like an end in sight. And so, I mean, I can say right now that I have projects up my sleeve that I'm working on um, that are really exciting for me and that I yeah, that I think are gonna like fill that bucket.
That's nice. That's well said too. In fact, it's funny, one of the questions I like to ask all my guests is about motivating students. And often by the time we've gotten to the question, like you have, you've clearly shown a lot of the ways that you motivate your students. But I want to ask it all the same. You get a student who, for whatever reason, at a particular point in their young career, they're either stuck or they're just lacking in motivation. What do you do in general, to help them get fired up again?
Yeah, I think with my students, I like to emphasize because with Ralph, I feel like I definitely had this. Um, he was such a beautiful like mentor to me. And I
Hmm.
think to all of his students that it was teacher, but then also mentor. And so with all of my students, I want to make sure that they can rely on me as a mentor too. And so that I'm taking care of them because if I take care of them, I'm taking care of them as the musician or the cellist. And so like I check in on them and I make sure like, are you okay? How's it going at school? Like, what's up? And like I make sure that we have like mentorship level conversations where they feel like if they are stuck, they can tell me and we can troubleshoot it together. But it's if they tell me, then that's also expressing a willingness to try to work on it or try to find a solution. So I think that that's kind of like the first point, this little access point to kind of re like finding that motivation again.
That's great. Yeah, that mentorship component is, and especially like what you say, it seems compared to say 50 years ago,
Mm,
much more critical that we do.
right. I think it is, yeah. It's essential. What we do it can be tough. And we kind of need to stick together and support one another and make sure that we all feel like we have those little bits of happiness and fulfillment equal successfulness.
That's nice. Well, I do. I'm anxious to hear what your future projects are and upcoming performances. The rest of like the academic year, what does
Mhm.
it hold in store?
Well, I'm going to be actually teaching at two universities next semester. I'm going to be here in Seattle at the University of Washington, and then also filling in for Edward Aaron's sabbatical um, at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Um, so I'll be flying cross country every week.
Every week.
Yeah, it's a little insane. I know. I'm like
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just trying to take this next month off. Just,
Right.
take it easy before I begin that commute. Um, so I'll be doing that, and I play with an ensemble in Boston. I'm a member of an ensemble there, chamber ensemble. So I fly to Boston a lot, and well, I'll be flying to Boston even more with Amherst. Um, Next fall, it's not really the culmination, but one part of this big project that I've been working on. And I won't like divulge too much information, but I commissioned five new pieces for solo cello to accompany a piece written in 1929 um, by a composer who was murdered at Auschwitz. And it's a way to kind of resurrect that piece into the present day, and it's gonna be my first like debut CD. And it's also gonna be the first commercial recording of that piece written in 1929. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, that's a big project for me, a big, endeavor. And I'm working on establishing um a little project here that is going to be Seattle specific.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
In the
Well,
chamber music film. Yeah.
all right. Terrific. Terrific. Yeah, it's a just scrolling through your schedule. You're a very active performer, which is great. I mean, that's why we want to have cello as our vocation is because we love the music that we get to play and we love playing it. So, and yeah, you have very, very beautiful playing. I'm looking forward to your first
Thanks.
CD
Oh, thank you.
release.
That's so
Um,
nice of you. Thanks.
yeah, absolutely. And best of luck with these upcoming projects.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right. All right. Well, and all of you out there, practice all weekend, practice next week, and then take an hour off at 5 o'clock next Friday. We'll see you then. Take care.
You had me at